Throughout this whole process, I came across shamanic healing and was looking up healers through a search engine, and Holly had come up, so I decided to contact her about it. So pretty much for Holly, I was just another client. So this is the norm for her: entities being attached to people, stuff like that. That's just what she does. So I was just another client. I mean, there's no offense taken at all. So I come in through the door, and like, what was your first impression? Did you see an attachment on me, or he just looks like a regular guy?
You just look like a regular guy. I could tell you were in pain. I don't see attachments till I really kind of get into my session, but I could tell that you were in a lot of pain and that you were suffering. That was very apparent.
Yeah, and then I told you everything that happened to her, like what I was experiencing, like what you were telling people about your work as a healer, like the stuff, the images I was getting in my head, anger and anxiety on steroids, undesirable, unwanted sexual images, animal abuse, child pedophilia, lack of empathy. So throughout this process, I'm a very empathic man, and once that attachment came on me, my empathy just plummeted. So therefore, all that anger, anxiety comes in. I start getting all those images, and I'm behaving in ways, or getting thoughts of behaving in ways, where I'm just like, whoa, hold on a second. 33 years of living on this earth, I have not once thought about these things. Something's very wrong.
Exactly. And you're lucky that you had the awareness to understand that, because many people just go through their day-to-day life getting totally consumed. So yes, when you came in, I could tell that you were really, really suffering. And, a thought just occurred to me. It's like when we're having these images, right? We're literally seeing the entity's memory, because those images have to come from somewhere, right? And once that attachment comes, it's like you're seeing their timeline almost, which is very interesting. So once we got into the session, that's when I was really able to see, and you did tell me that you had crossed lines that you weren't supposed to, like you literally crossed caution tape. And that caution tape was there for a reason. And it really makes me wonder who put the caution tape there and why. It's almost like there was an energetic barrier, but I'm just speculating. So once I got in, the entity began to speak through you, and they're very good at trying to shame the extractor, right? Calling me bitch and a bunch of profanity names. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm a fake. It's like textbook standard for them, right? So I thought it was a male, because a lot of times the more aggressive entities are males. And as I begin to see her, obviously I realized it was a her, and then I could begin to see where she was. And she was in this very dark tunnelway, very underground, right? And these underground tunnels are real, and they have been around for years, and they still operate. It is not fake, it's real. And she was actually trafficking children and women in the sex trade, and I could tell that she had handlers. It was just very obvious. She was doing her job. She was under threat. And I could just almost see the children too, just there, kind of like a Shanghai type scenario. And this entity had so much guilt and pain and shame that I could not remove her until I literally cleared it out of your chakra field. Once we began to clear, the guilt was really, really big. Once we begin to clear that guilt, that's when she began to loosen up, and we're finally able to cross her over into the light.
Yeah. Well, also before that, I was trying to shoot one of our videos called Walking Amongst the Dead at that mausoleum. And the people I contacted about it were like, oh no, we're not allowing people to film in the mausoleum. And then I asked a second time, like, sorry Adam, like the answer is no. And then I went ahead and did it anyway, and that makes me think, okay, I had loved ones protecting me. It was because sometimes as paranormal investigators you can't take no for an answer, but then there's times where it's like, oh, somebody was protecting me.
Well, I mean, that's a hard call to make too, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're
They may have been protecting me.
Well, no, not that, but taking no for an answer. When you're investigating anything, you got to go through the red tape.
Yes, that's right, and that's what I was doing.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is, it's not so much that I went in there, it was that I forgot to disengage with spirit as I left there, and that was always something that I had made a habit on in over 10 years of doing this, and I forgot to do it that one time.
Why do you think you forgot?
Because my instinct was telling me to get out of there. So fight or flight mode was on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can I ask at what point you had that get out of there moment? Like what happened?
So when I crossed the red tape, walking down the mausoleum, I turned the corner and there was no lights. It started to get darker. And then there was another corridor that I turned and it was just completely dark. And that's when my instinct acted up and said, Adam, you gotta go now. And I didn't even argue. I was like, okay, yeah, like I'm leaving.
At any point, did you feel some sort of attachment get onto you? Did you feel like a breeze? Or for instance, I was at a concert once and I literally felt this entity go right into my scapula, right into my shoulder blade, and it attached right to my second chakra.
Okay.
Like I felt it go in. Did you feel anything like that?
It was colder down there,
Mm-hmm.
but like I said, it was fight or flight mode. So I just immediately got out of there. And I mean, it was an 8-story mausoleum, so I mean, I had a lot of walking to do before I got to the exit. So I was on like the 2nd floor, and like the exit is on the 5th floor. So I had to go up a lot of stairs and a lot of hallways to leave.
And then once you left, going into the next day, when did you start to notice something wasn't right?
When I crossed the Selwood Bridge, it was like, why do I feel different? Something's wrong here.
That's fast.
Yeah. And I was at the gym, I was like, I do not feel like me. Like, the Adam from yesterday is not the Adam today.
Okay, so this was in like a few hours that you felt
Yeah, so how I knew that this wasn't me was like, there were no signs from the past. Like, you know, I didn't abuse animals. Like, I don't even hurt flies. Stuff like that. And I was like changing like that.
Yeah.
And it was like, it was too fast and too sudden. And it was just a huge shock to me. I was on the verge of just losing it in public.
Yep.
Like, I was literally driving, I would stand in the line to get lunch, and I'm like ready to fall on my knees and start screaming.
Yes. Do you think that if you didn't have your background in paranormal activity, do you think that you would have caught that?
No.
Or do you think you would have just...
No.
Right.
I would not have caught that.
See, and it's so important that people have some sort of spiritual or paranormal background. They don't have to do the deep dive, but to understand when all of a sudden you're having these images of hurting animals and you've never had that before, something happened.
Yeah, and extreme sexual preferences.
Yeah. So that.
Oh yeah, sorry. One thing that I wanted to mention before I got there, it was like my emotions were manipulated like none other. It was just like, I know this isn't me, but it's like, it's actually like I actually want to do these things.
I think it's key, if anybody gets anything out of watching this, it is that sudden onset of something different. And if all of a sudden you think of something violent, whatever, but if you continue to have these thoughts and they're not yours, there's something going on.
When you were extracting the entity from me, like all of a sudden it was like a person was speaking through me to you.
Yes.
And in here I'm like, what the hell, I'm not saying this.
So we're trained, and is how I teach this as well, is I'm putting your subconscious or your conscious mind, I'm giving your conscious mind a task. And so that's why I'm asking you to count backwards from 100 to 1 by 3s, because all of a sudden you're distracted. While I'm also asking you to allow and let the entity speak through you, right? So you're distracted, which allows the entity to come up and speak.
Well, and I also remember that I was crying a lot. And I was also like, how am I crying like this?
I believe that was her tears. The entity.
Which is what I thought too.
Yes.
Because it was very strange. I'm just like, well, like, I don't feel like that.
Now, another thing, I don't think the entity was from that long ago. I'm kind of sensing it was just from around like the 40s or 50s. It wasn't an entity from like 200 years gone down. It was in the 1900s for sure.
Yeah. I remember I was holding the stone and you yanked it out of my hand. Why did you do that?
The crystal?
Yeah.
So, in the shamanic, so we use a medicine bundle, and this is a whole nother process that you make as you go through the medicine wheel. But how we extract fluid entities or thought forms is we take a double terminated quartz crystal, and you want to have a crystal with less inclusions. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in your hand, and I'm literally going to use, all Mesa carriers have a tracking stone. This is my tracking stone that actually broke during an entity extraction. I should replace it, but this was a entity extraction I did from Portland. The client was in Reno and the stone busted. So I'm going to take my tracking stone and I'm going to feel where the entity is in Adam's body, right? So I'm going to feel it, right? In the shamanic, we get rites that create light out of our fingers. So we're going to use our fingers of light to comb through, right? We're going to find hot spots on the body or cold spots on the body, and we're going to track the entity through, coaxing it to come to the light in his hand, right? Once the entity is once we feel it go into the crystal, I kind of like shock the client, right? So I sort of like, I kind of just, and I grab the crystal out, and then we put it in here as fast as possible, this opaque covering, because it keeps the entity in. You can hold up to 5 entities in one crystal. You want to release it after 3 days. How you release it is you're going to take Florida water. It's a clearing spray that we make with white alcohol and essential oils. You're going to loosen both ends by heating it on a candle, right? And then you go out and you blow the entity to the light in the 4 directions, and make sure you're avoiding telephone wires or other buildings or trees. You're blowing it straight up into the light. And so this is what you use. That's why I yanked it out and gave a little scream.
Right.
Because then you shocked back.
Yeah, I didn't.